The Fool is the first card in the Tarot deck and the first card of the 22 major Arcana cards. Tarot is in fact a story. It is the story of man, or the story of the Fool in the Fool's journey. Along this journey, the Fool comes across other characters or archetypes that correspond to different aspects, elements, personas, energies, fates, landmarks, etc. of mankind and his life here on Earth. These other archetypes can be considered as playable characters in the sense that when performing a reading for a querent, every card that comes up can represent the querent or someone in relation to the querent. The major arcana are typically seen as archetypes or elements in one's life that are unchangeable, at times unpredictable, and represent the base model of one's life. Whereas the minor arcana show more interpersonal aspects of the querent or someone in relation to the querent and are forever changing. Whereas the minor arcana show more interpersonal aspects of the querent or someone in relation to the querent and are forever changing. The major arcana are elements, archetypes, and energies that are out of our control, divine fate, as you might call it, and pose as signposts and major landmarks along the way of the Fool's or the querent's journey. Major arcana cards are quote unquote major in the sense that they serve as important and meaningful reminders. I use the word archetypes frequently in my readings. I think it's important to emphasize that the tarot are filled with many symbols, characters, animals, deities, elements, and hidden meanings, and therefore are archetypes or individual aspects, and not always another person. For example, the Fool shows the archetype of someone who is beginning a new and very important adventure in their life. There's essentially no time to think, no time to judge, no time to second guess. There's only moving forward into the unknown. The Fool has a vision and a goal, and the only way he's going to get there is by following his path and staying on his path and having faith and trust in his path, even though he may not be able to see the finish line. Along the way, he meets other characters or archetypes, eventually ending up at the final major arcana card, the World card, where his journey is then completed. Another way of looking at this is the first character that the Fool comes across is the Magician. The Magician teaches the Fool all the tricks and trades of the four elements that make up this physical reality and the elemental tools that will help him will his manifestations into existence. So the Fool has an idea of where he wants to go and where he wants to be for the most part. Sometimes he has no clue, and that's why he is considered a fool. But he has a divine calling to act and walk his path regardless of what is going on. Upon meeting the Magician, the Fool is now able to incorporate the divine spark he received, coupled with the alchemical knowledge of the Magician. The Fool can take on the archetype of the Magician for himself. So in a tarot reading, the Fool and the Magician can be one and the same and not two separate people. In Qabala, the Fool is placed on path 11. This is the path that connects Keter and Chokmah. Path 11 is essentially the very first action, the very first step, after receiving the divine spark or divine guidance through Keter, which is represented by one of the four aces and acts as an antenna to receive from the divine. The Fool on this path is the point of all beginnings and endings. This is considered to be a lightning bulb moment. It's the sudden realization or the sudden knowledge or insight one can receive from the divine in order to fulfill his or her karmic or dharmic duties. The Fool is numbered 0. The Hebrew letter that represents the Fool is Aleph. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph Bet, the first letter of man, Adam, the first letter of the first Jew, Abraham, and the first letter of the first element, fire, Aish. Aleph makes no sound. It is, quote, only the sound you make when you begin to make a sound. Although Aleph represents fire, in the tarot, the Fool corresponds to air. You can relate this air element to breath or prana. Another way of looking at the energy behind the Fool card is Brahman. which is the Hindu representation of the entire universe and all that exists within the realms of the universe. In the Sefer Yetzirah, Book of Formations, the Fool corresponds to Ruach, which is attributed to Aleph. Ruach is Hebrew for breath, wind, or spirit. As you may see by now, the Fool is highly connected to the divine and divine essence. The Fool is the chosen one. There's purity in the Fool. He can be likened to that of a newborn child, one who is free from sin and impurities, free from any wrongdoings, a clean slate, a fresh new start at life, and a new path that lays before him. How the Fool travels along this path can be seen as true free will, whereas his predetermined fate is in his calling or in the act of being chosen. So essentially, the energy of the Fool and its correspondence to the air element is connected to spirit or prana. It is the life force, the divine energy that exists all around us, and it animates the entire universe, or Brahman. The Fool is like the blueprint, the root, quite literally that very first step. Aleph gives form, it gives meaning, it gives purpose and significance. It gives reason. The pictograph for Aleph is an ox head. The ox represents strength, power, fertility, and hard work. In ancient times, the ox was basically the modern day tractor. The ox was a very important animal in regards to farming and agriculture. Oxen pulled plows to break up the ground for farmers to plant seeds. The ox and the ox head can also be linked as a symbol for the father. The ox itself is also a symbol of sacrifice. The astrological correspondence of the Fool card is the planet Uranus and sometimes Pluto. I rarely, if ever, relate the Fool to Pluto, but I have seen this relationship being made by other tarot readers who practice Kabbalah, so I wanted to include that. Uranus in astrology acts as an initiator. Uranus is the wise old man, guru, or the grandparent. Uranus bestows within itself knowledge, wisdom, and experience. When Uranus is activated in someone's birth chart or through planetary transits, the events that follow are very shocking and electrifying. Sometimes they can be violent or chaotic or out of character. Uranus is completely out of our control. The energy is very rapid and sudden. Uranus is also the rebel or the rebellion, the one who's willing to step outside of social norms, the one who is willing to stand up, make a vow, challenge the status quo, and acts on reason through impulsive or sometimes involuntary means. Thus, the Fool taking his first step after receiving sudden insights can be seen as a rebellious act, going against the grain, doing the unthinkable, being unafraid to be the first, and to initiate what has been given to him. There's a quote from The Matrix where Trinity tells Neo, "This has never been done before." And Neo replies with, "That's why it's going to work." So Uranus can sometimes be seen as the unthinkable, again, the initiator or the innovator, the invention, new concepts, new philosophies, religions, spiritual practices, new ways of living, things that may have never been done before, and thus making it rebellious. In the traditional Rider-Waite design, the Fool appears to be stepping off of a cliff, and he's not even looking at where he's going. He seems to be preoccupied with the vision he sees above him, or the vision he has received from above. There's that shocking or chaotic energy coming into play here. Uranus's main purpose is to uplift and liberate, to achieve higher consciousness, and essentially to escape from the constraints of the mundane life. In the upright position, the Fool represents new beginnings, a new journey, the journey, inspiration, divine guidance, sudden insights, taking the first step, right direction, one's higher calling, and a path. This is considered to be a harmonious card, but it can also be very neutral. As mentioned before, there's some unpredictability and chaotic behavior behind this card. I suppose it's a matter of perception and perspective, which are other very important traits of the Fool. In a reading, this can be a sign that new beginnings will be taking place for the querent or someone in relation to the querent. It could also be new beginnings in a particular event, situation, or through more metaphysical or spiritual means. In the reverse position, the Fool represents blind faith, unwillingness, ignoring one's calling, self doubt, reckless decision, being careless, foolish, and misguided judgment. In a tarot reading, the reverse position is considered to be disharmonious, chaotic, and destructive. This can be seen as the querent or someone in relation to the querent who is either acting purely on impulse with no real purpose or reason, or someone who is stagnant and unwilling to change or accept the path that's been laid out before them. This likely will result in one's own self destruction, self undoing, and can also show signs of depression. I'll go over a few of the meanings behind the symbols and drawings of the Fool card that may not be widely known compared to some of the other symbolism we find on this card. Firstly, the use of the color white can signify more than just purity. White is not considered to be a color, but the full spectrum of color. On the Fool's clothing, we can see 10 yellow circles, which represents the 10 sephirah on the tree of life. Inside of each of the 10 yellow circles are 8 red spokes, which corresponds to the cosmic rhythm, or an octave. It can also be linked to the Dharma wheel, or Dharma chakra, which is the perfection of Dharma or the path to liberation. Liberation is linked to Uranus and the element of air. On the Fool's belt, there are 7 circles representing the 7 main astrological planets, and what we don't see on his belt behind him would be the remaining 5 circles, which would equate to the 12 zodiac signs.